Hello, my name is Ryan HATA, and I'm part of the cybersecurity team here at Culminate, and I'll be briefing you on the recent cybersecurity incident. Culminate is a leader in software development, cloud architecture, AI solutions, and digital transformation. In many ways, this success is due to the cultural development, organizational structure, and relationships that have allowed Culminate to not only be a great place to work, but a resilient and flexible enterprise. Unfortunately, many of the same qualities that lend Culminate its strengths also expose it to certain risks, especially from a cyber perspective. In this briefing, we will first discuss the incident, how it occurred, what actions were taken in response, and how we can move forward to prevent further incidents while strengthening the core values that make Culminate such a great place to work. This is a brief timeline of the incident. It started with an initial phishing email, and this led to unauthorized access by a nefarious actor, that's a cyber attacker. They then were able to achieve lateral movement throughout the network and exfiltrate data and probe additional secure files. We will talk about this in detail, and then we'll begin to talk about our incident response and lessons learned. On day zero, a project coordinator in Culminate's Texas client delivery office received a highly targeted spear phishing email masquerading as an internal HR policy update. If you're not familiar with a spear phishing attempt, spear phishing is where a nefarious actor, a cyber attacker, will craft an often very legitimate looking email and send it to an individual. This can be through many different types of communication, but email tends to be one of the most common. This email that was sent to the project coordinator led to a spoofed login page, which required the individual to enter their credentials. This is how the attacker gained initial access into Culminate's systems. Once the attacker obtained the stolen credentials, they were able to exploit a misconfigured trusted device that allowed multi-factor authentication bypass under certain conditions. This allowed valid authentication without triggering any type of additional verification. Once authenticated, the attacker leveraged legacy, overly permissive VPN routing that allowed the Texas endpoint to access internal Chicago headquarters systems. Additional lateral movement was attempted towards the DevOps credentials vault and the AI modeling training files. However, these were both unsuccessful. The next morning at 2:41 a.m., we detected 4.2 terabytes of outbound data from the Chicago file server through the compromised Texas workstation. Again, the additional probing attempts to the DevOps credential vault, as well as the AI modeling files, was unsuccessful, although this was attempted, it just was unsuccessful. Now, how did we not see this? It was complicated. There were many mixed signals. So attempts to access the DevOps credential vault, as well as the AI training files, reflected probing attempts and true system alerts. These occurred near simultaneously with spikes in outbound email traffic from Texas, which were caused by increased emails, either originating from Texas and possibly automated retries. This was not a mass exfiltration of data. Additionally, there were scheduled automated SharePoint permission change notifications. These were scheduled. These also created a signal. However, they were legitimate signals, not attempts to escalate unauthorized permissions. So all of these factors together created a confusing picture of false, mixed, and possibly misleading signals, as well as true signals, all occurring during the time of the breach. As soon as the incident was recognized, we began a coordinated response. Effective collaboration across teams was crucial for managing the situation and ensuring all departments were aligned and responsive. Clear communication ensured transparency and prompt critical information sharing across departments to facilitate a smooth, coordinated response. All of this was to preserve operations, deliverables, and our reputation. The Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, participated in real-time briefings, confirmed escalation thresholds, and aligned with public relations and legal on external notification posture. Information technology and operations worked to identify and isolate the endpoints, VPN routing changes, and identity resets. legal advised on regulatory exposure, attorney-client privilege, breach notifications, and evidence preservation. Operations and delivery leadership maintained continuity of operations, ensuring that no client impact or rumors occurred. And HR, or human resources, notified owners, controlled messaging, and ensured owners return to productivity as soon and as efficiently as possible. So what did we do exactly in the incident response? The first thing we did was disable compromised user accounts and revoke all active sessions. We then disabled misconfigured trusted devices. We isolated the Texas workstation that had been compromised, and we isolated and restricted the VPN routing between Texas and Chicago. We also locked down access to DevOps, to the AI training files, and all other critical data. This helped to contain and segment the compromised aspects of the network while protecting critically sensitive data and operational continuity. It also limited exposure, for example, to client-facing portals and networks. So what did we not do? Well, we did not feel it was necessary to shut down all global email. We only needed to shut down any email that may have been compromised. We did not disable company-wide VPN access, as we know that not all of the VPNs used in the company were compromised. We didn't take entire offices or regions offline, as this was an isolated workstation. We also did not halt DevOps pipelines, as there had been no data compromise in this arena, and we did not disrupt our client environments. This was a limited intrusion, and we did not feel it was necessary to further disrupt operations. And the culture of Culminate, as well as the trust both within and outside of the company, are some of the key assets and values that we have at the company. We felt that an extensive overarching shutdown would not only compromise this trust, but potentially lead to a loss of credibility and sense of safety for both our owners and our clients. The rationale behind this was to maintain business continuity. We did not want to stop all active processes, only those processes that were compromising the network. And we didn't need to chase every alert, as there were many different signals coming simultaneously. We wanted to protect our high-value assets first, including protected or private personal information, our DevOps information, as well as our AI intellectual property. We wanted to preserve evidence for legal and forensic review to prevent another breach. And we wanted to maintain business continuity unless the disruption clearly reduced the risks. And every decision was balanced with security and gain versus operational costs. And this is consistent with Culminate's culture as a resilient, employee-owned organization built to withstand disruption without panic. I'd like to conclude by discussing some of the overall impacts of this incident, as well as company-wide strategic impacts. Culminate is built on a unique culture, structure, and relationships that make us special. However, sometimes these values put us at unnecessary risk. From a leadership perspective, leaders must be empowered to address enterprise risk exposure and change culture when it is necessary. Our operations and IT departments must maintain operations while simultaneously isolating risks and vulnerabilities, using surgical containment strategies to limit operational impacts and adequately protecting sensitive data. Our legal department should understand cross-jurisdictional access, exposure regulations, and legal liabilities, including notification thresholds and evidence handling, as well as liability shielding and documentation. Human resources needs to avoid a blame culture and maintain transparency and trust in the company. They need to effectively educate the owners without employing a punitive model. And engineering must reinforce security and secrecy around intellectual property and sensitive data. This incident reinforces several realities for Culminate. Trust must be explicit, not assumed. We must adopt a zero-trust culture. Our work model, our 60-40 work model, while important and a key aspect of our corporate personality, must come with adequate security measures. Our owners must understand that working from home, while a great privilege, also poses certain risks. Our structure as a multi-site, multinational corporation exposes us to many benefits, but also many challenges. Additionally, acquisitions and mergers should be approached with thoughtful consideration. As we move forward, it will become increasingly important to have these safeguards in place for these challenges. At the end of the day, cyber incidents are enterprise events, not simply IT problems. This is about corporate resiliency, not panic, and it can become a competitive advantage. Remember, this may be a credibility builder, not a credibility loss. So with that, I thank you very much for this presentation. You can always contact me. My name is Ryan HATA, and I appreciate your time. Okay, that's the end of that part of the presentation, so I'll go on to the next part, part 2. So how did I use AI? Well, I used AI in many different ways. I used several different types of AI. I first read the entire situation, assignment, and all the readings, and then I formulated an idea of how I wanted to present. So I sort of brainstormed, had a bunch of different windows open, kind of came up with some drafts. And then I used two different AI models. The first was Canva, which does a lot of visual AI stuff. And I used that to create an initial presentation draft, which I didn't use actually very much of it, just kind of formulated a template. And then I used ChatGPT-4. I tried Grok and Claude AI, but they wouldn't work for some reason. I couldn't, I don't know, Grok said it was too full, it was too busy or something, and Claude wouldn't allow me to get on, so I could not use Claude AI. But I used those to analyze the situation and specific questions. So, I could demonstrate, but essentially I typed in, either cut and pasted or typed in a summary of the question, and I dragged in documents, including the explanation of what Culminate is, their sort of corporate explanation, and then I asked some targeted questions, and then once I got the output, which the outputs were quite long, I went through them and synthesized the material into my own presentation using the information that I thought was relevant, accurate, and appropriate, and I dismissed that which was either directly inaccurate. I felt like it was extrapolating too much beyond what was actually asked in the assignment. So here are a couple of examples of interactions with AI. This is on Canva. You can see over here on the left side of the screen, I basically dragged in that, or drug in that Culminate document, and then I posed this question. So I essentially just sort of cut and pasted. I don't want to summarize too much in my in this, because the more I summarize, the more it's going to not give me the most accurate output. And then you can see here on the right, this was sort of the output. It had, I don't know if you've ever used Canva, but basically it gives you like 3 different things that you could choose from. So you can kind of go through a series of different choices, and then it gives you 3 outputs. And I didn't use any of those. I didn't use any of the graphics or anything, but I went through them, and I got a pretty good idea of how I wanted to structure the talk. And I didn't follow it completely, but I did follow some of it. So, and then in my ChatGPT, again, this was more just kind of information gathering. I tend to ask it sometimes some fairly long questions. Like, for example, I did the same thing. You won't see the entire prompt up there, but I basically I dragged in the Culminate document, and then I just said, what are Culminate's unique cyber risks? And then it kind of put this out. From that, I was able to sort of formulate some of the, especially towards the end of the presentation, some of the things that we could come up with in terms of like, what is a strategic direction that we want to go in it from a cyber perspective. So anyway, that was with that. If you'd like more, I'm more than happy to share this. Of course, it's all saved. I can share, but I mean, it's like tons of pages of stuff that you have to go through. So how did AI kind of screw up, and how is it inaccurate? Well, here are a couple of things. This is a screenshot on the left of one of the Canva presentation slides, and it talks about, it kind of went through the timeline, had initial phishing, and then it talks about data exfiltration and lateral movement, which really it was more data, it was initial phishing, and then it was more lateral movement across the network, and then data exfiltration. Could you argue lateral movement within the DevOps and AI files? Sure. I mean, yes, it was. It's not purely, it's not perfect, but this was not entirely accurate. I think this, in my opinion, gives kind of a false impression of what exactly happened. That there was, phishing, and then it exfiltrated from Chicago, but then somehow it got into Chicago. It doesn't make any sense. And that could be dangerous. Obviously, that's going to be inaccurate. And then on the ChatGPT side is on the right here. So I assumed it assumes many things, as you probably are aware. It assumes many things that are not actually written. For example, high value IP without crown jewel guardrails. Well, it doesn't know what kind of guardrails are really around the IP. It just says that it has crown. They don't have crown jewel guardrails. So if you were to assume this and then put it in there, you might be completely off base, and you might actually really be not speaking accurately. So these things can certainly be dangerous. These are just a few examples, and that's why I actually use AI sparingly and usually in very targeted ways, either one of two ways, either very targeted or in a really broad sense to kind of get a good overall sense of what's going on, and then I'll kind of pick and choose from it. So what are some of the insights that I learned? Well, here are two of the big ones. Know your people, and then know the role of a cybersecurity leader. So, really this is about making sure that you know your people and that you form those relationships. I realize that that is absolutely key, and I think that's something that is often not talked about very much, is developing those relationships so that you can have a positive type of influence, especially to empower people. And I really appreciated the idea of the role of a cybersecurity leader. How is that defined? This is a role that is that needs to be influential, something that is not just an IT or a technical role, as many, I think a lot of companies or a lot of individuals think. Especially when I tell them about cybersecurity, they often think, "Oh, you're an IT guy," and I say, "Actually, I'm not an IT guy really at all." But that it doesn't mean I don't understand much of the IT, but I don't work in IT per se. But I think a cybersecurity leader, just like many other leaders, have to understand how to be influential within their field. And so what is my mantra? Well, I'm not very good at these kind of things, but I will say that it is lead through relationships, example, and empowerment. And those, I think that's a good way to kind of sum up how I want to focus my leadership style. Anyway, thank you very much, and I hope this was helpful, and I hope I did a good job on the assignment. Thanks again. I learned a lot. I thought it was a really fun assignment. Thank you. Bye.